As a long-time fan and someone deeply familiar with the series Stargate, I've always admired how the series tackles the idea of gods. For those that haven't seen it, Stargate kind of flips the script on the ideas of ancient myths and religious beliefs, showing how many gods worshipped by ancient civilizations were actually real, however just alien beings. Yes, it's based on the ancient alien conspiracy theory, which I'm not too keen on, but I can't help that I like Stargate. These alien beings, or gods, used their advanced technology and power to rule as deities. But even for the fans that know this, Stargate goes much further. It challenges the very concept of divinity by asking what makes a god a god. Is it raw power, or the ability to inspire fear and devotion, or something more? It even goes further to try and explain that we don't understand the will of God, even if we directly disagree with their actions or lack of action. And for those that are familiar with Stargate, I'm referring to the Ascended Beings, which took the lack of action option, and only later explained why. And just like in Stargate, we'll look into that later too. Through its stories, the show pushes us to question whether gods are simply misunderstood beings, and whether our definitions are shaped more by perspective than reality. For me, Stargate perfectly encapsulates why defining God is so difficult. It's not just about power, it's about how we interpretate that power, amongst many other things, or maybe none of those things. Quick disclaimer though, if you haven't yet watched Stargate and plan to, or you're halfway through it, then this is going to be one heck of a spoiler warning. But if you don't plan to watch it or don't mind the spoilers, then I'll explain everything along the way to enough to make my point. The gods of Stargate. Clearly false gods. The most obvious gods in these scenarios are simply aliens posing as gods, but they do cover many things. I mean, even the Christian god is mentioned at least once.
We have challenged Apophis. He will not rest until the people of this world worship him as their god.
There is only one God, sir. We are, after all, one nation under God.
And you think God is going to save us?
Admittedly, I assume Christian based on the context, but anyway, even Yahweh, the Christian god, assuming that it exists, apparently existed before the earth because, Yahweh created the earth, meaning that Yahweh cannot be from the earth, so Yahweh must be an alien, including many of the other gods that supposedly created the earth, or like with the ancient gods, those that came from the sky, known as like the Anunnaki, and many others. This isn't something mentioned in Stargate at all, just something I was pointing out. However, just to clarify, the more sort of modern religions aren't really tackled in Stargate, and their gods aren't usually challenged in the way that ancient gods would be. If you want that, you'd have to look at Rick and Morty.
It's a big day. We're gonna kill God.
Come again?
Christian God is real. He's been asleep for thousands of years. We're gonna sneak up there and kill him. Mob style. Just whack his ass.
Can I kill God?
Stop, Summer.
Beth, do you hear this?
So what gods does Stargate actually offer? Most of the gods that start the show come from our ancient mythologies throughout history. The first in the original movie is the Egyptian god Ra, which is actually a Goa'uld parasite. The same can be said for many of the gods that arise in the beginning of the series. The majority come from the Goa'uld, which is a parasitic serpent-like creature that infects a host, usually a human, but not always, and in doing so can sort of provide extra powers and benefits like healing and extra long life. Some of these, but not all of them because there was a lot of them, are Apophis, Baal, can't remember. Apophis, Hathor, Baal, Heroer, Satesh, and even Sokar with hellish-like depictions. It's practically the literal hell. Generally, it's the Goa'uld that have dominion over the Milky Way galaxy. There was even Anubis that was definitely on a completely different level. Again, we'll talk about him later. He's kind of like the step up, but a stepping stone to another step. So these gods were the gods that ruled closest to us as an interacting species. And they definitely weren't friendly. They demanded worship. So, when we're on our planet and we like to have freedom of religion, they wouldn't be quite fond of that one. No, they wanted to take over to make us serve them. But nonetheless, I think it's safe to say these so-called gods were not actually gods. Just the obvious case that false gods do exist, ruling with threats of death and torment. Though some of these beings may have actually considered themselves a god, deluding themselves into thinking in the way they want their believers to. But this also shows that the Goa'uld were not the only beings to achieve worship as false gods, though. Even humans from Earth could be perceived as such. And not all aliens were worshipped as gods. However, with the Wraith, admittedly this was a rare anomaly, there were humans that worshipped these predators. But not all were bad, like the Salish gods in the episode Spirits, that only wanted to protect their people and their planet from us, trying to mine their planet and destroy and damage the natural environment. There were even giants on another plane of existence or dimension that you can't perceive without a crystal skull, that the show never really looks into again. I think they planned to and never did. One obvious example, though, that I haven't mentioned is the Asgard, based on mostly Norse mythology, where you have Thor and Freya, but the more familiar grey aliens, hyper-intelligent beings from like Area 51 with the alien autopsy and, Paul.
Anyone want one of these? Anyone? Anyone?
These aliens are your typical grey aliens. They aren't as powerful in the physical form as a Goa'uld is. However, they do possess much greater advanced technology than the Goa'uld. And they didn't rule with fear or torment usually. It was more of a, I'm fed up of explaining that I'm not a god to you people, so we're just going to roll with it and then wait until you're more advanced enough to know the truth. The Asgards were clearly false gods, just like the Goa'uld, but they had more technology, and that makes them more godlike. But no matter how much technology you have, no amount of technology makes you a god. No matter how many people want to believe that Rick Sanchez is an actual god. But if technology isn't a basis at all for divinity, then where else can we look for in a sci-fi show to help us define a god? If we only have false gods as examples, how is this going to help when it's a sci-fi show that's clearly based on technology only? Well, there was a little fantasy element in Stargate where there seemed to be some form of real religion that you could follow, or at least more like enlightenment, and could ascend. But rather than looking at it like a religion, you could also look at it from a more scientific perspective and consider it a stem of evolution, if you like. Kind of like how X-Men was portrayed, but not how X-Men resulted in mutants. It's definitely not the same. Omar Dasala is an ascended being that not only lives? Exists is probably a better word. Exists on another plane of existence, who also seems to possess omnipotence, all-powerful, absolute power. As do all ascended beings, she is not the only one, and not even the first one you meet. However, almost all of them refuse to use that omnipotence to help with matters within the galaxy. They are also at the mercy of others, so if they do break the rule of no assisting in the matters within the galaxy, then they can be banished. Just like the first ascended being you meet in the show called Orlin. Once an ascended being is banished, they become human again. Because we are going a bit too far too quickly, we need to step back just a little bit. As there was the stepping stone, Anubis. That guy we mentioned before, that I wanted to talk about before the ascended beings, but I kind of needed to explain the banished part. Anyway, we can now move into the section of the not so false but still false gods. Anubis was just an alien, a Goa'uld, that ruled just like the Goa'uld do. He was a part of the system lords that controlled the galaxy and, had an agreement with each other not to fight and kill each other. But essentially, Anubis was deemed too dangerous, too deadly, and too just evil. He was evil. So even the Goa'ulds that we perceive as quite evil kicked him out of their, social club. He was an extreme of those extremists. Yes, even Sokar, the literal devil who created hell, deemed Anubis too evil. And they were right to consider Anubis a threat to the Goa'uld system lords, because after he was banished, Anubis tricked Omar Dasala into assisting him in ascending, before learning his true intentions. However, upon learning of his intentions to use his power for evil, the ascended beings banished him like they did with Orlin, though Orlin kind of, didn't deserve it, maybe. That's debated, but Anubis definitely deserved it. They punished him by keeping him in an ascended form, meaning that he couldn't really exist without a human host, which is kind of how he existed before. But he was an ascended, half-ascended Goa'uld being that infected humans, He couldn't really exist in the real world, but he was a gaseous entity. He was Ghastly, the Pokemon.
But you know not who I am.
He retained much of his ascended knowledge, including the advanced technologies and the ability to manipulate energy. He was immune to most forms of harm, making him nearly invincible in the material realm. You know, like the tangible, real world, or galaxy in this case. Though that dynamic of human and Goa'uld symbiosis, he transcended it to a different level. He was the Superman of the Goa'uld world. He was seen as a literal god above all gods, amassed incredible technology that even rivaled the Asgard, and could demonstrate his powers as a god by manipulating energy, beyond that of anyone else, and without technological restraint. Without using the word god, he was magic, he was a wizard. You're a wizard, Harry, Anubis.
I'm a what?
A wizard.
But Harry Potter, nor any other wizards or witches, are gods, so Anubis isn't a god either. So let's take a look at those ascended beings once more. False gods that are not gods because there can be only one god version of gods. But don't worry, we'll get to that god too. The ascended beings are as godlike as God actually gets. Ish. We can go one step further in this, but I'm not really sure how we can go any further than that one. They do seem to follow rules about their omnipotence, but those rules are self-imposed upon the group as the group. Without the group consensus of, we shall not interfere, they could rule the galaxy if they were evil and just, outright dominate and just, delete the Goa'uld. They literally have that ability. They could just look at Anubis and go, bye-bye, and gone. Not literally squeezing him, they just think it and he's gone. They're omnipotent. They can literally reshape the universe they see fit. They have the ability to change the weather on planets without any technology. They can light fires if you like. They can make people think they have control over these things, which means they can read minds. The idea that they can't interfere in the realm of the mortals in the galaxy is a self-imposed rule. It's demonstrated multiple times that the rule can actually be broken, which means it's not an objective rule. It's just a rule that meets the consequences of their own. Kind of like our justice system. Stops a human, even though I have the ability to do random things. I could go outside naked. No, I'm not going to say that. I'll say I could go out and break the law, but I don't want to. Not always because of consequences, but I just don't want to. As with most of the ancients, they don't want to, but sometimes they feel a need to. They're drawn to, mostly for good reasons, like with Orlin. But just like atheists, like myself nowadays, ask theists why their god won't help us anymore. Why does the evil Goa'ulds exist if more knowledgeable, more powerful beings that could stop them also exist that want them to stop? Just by merely thinking about it, which, as I said, is generally explained the same way theists argue it, that we simply cannot understand God's will. Because God's will is beyond our comprehension, we couldn't comprehend it, and God values free will. And these things are generally seen as contradictory, and Stargate at least attempts to address that issue quite directly. For example, we mentioned Orlin, who was banished, and he was banished because the Goa'uld were planning an attack on this planet that could almost defend themselves. So Orlin stepped in and gave them plans for a better weapon beyond their knowledge, and they succeeded in defending themselves against the Goa'uld. For me, I still don't see this as an answer, because I would have said, well, if they could achieve the action of destroying those Goa'uld, he could have just, as I said, delete them from existence. But he didn't do that, which I also would think is wrong, but I'm just saying that would have been a better option than give these primitive people a massive gun that can defend their planet and then they destroy themselves with it. But as I'm a pacifist, and so are they apparently, the ascended beings, so surely they would have took a note out of the Nox's book, how they plan on surviving the Goa'uld, which is stealth. They just hide and also have the same premise of free will. They can do as they please. So, yeah, I don't really like the extreme pacifist shown in the Stargate show, but, you know, I kind of agree with their logic, generally speaking, because I am a pacifist. But I also see problems in pacifism, so... Or even, instead of the Nox's complete pacifism, you could use the idea of the Asgard, so anyone who came to the planet just gets teleported somewhere else. That way the planet's still safe, you don't have to kill anyone, but, you know, some of the Goa'ulds leave their host and die, and the host lives in the Asgard scenario, so there is that version too. But then we also know that the Tolans can remove the host, can remove the parasite, not the host, can remove the parasite from the host, so they could just teleport them into a Tolan prison for that to happen, and then eventually everyone would be free. Which could also be done by the ancients instantly, but they choose not to help. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is, Orlan could have took a better action, but didn't, so it kind of doesn't address the issue that it's trying to address. However, it's just trying to get across that message. And also another quick disclaimer that is only the first part of the message. It does delve deeper into the idea of that by hiding us from the All-Right. But whether he did the right thing or not is pretty subjective in general. You know, because morality isn't objective. They don't intervene because of the Ori. So the Ori are ascended beings just like the ancients, and they come from the same species, I think they're called Altarians. But the main difference is they have different philosophical views, just like between the Goa'uld, who pose as gods, and the Tok'ra, the same species, but very different philosophical views. The Tok'ra don't take over the host, they just coexist with the host, kind of swapping, so, you know, a person with two personalities. Extending the life, but sharing the life. The differences between the Ori and the ancients is that the Ori found that they could have followers and have people believe in them, and that grows their strength and their power.
And I'm not denying they are very powerful beings, but if I'm right, they're not gods. They're like the ascended beings I know. They simply have a greater understanding of the knowledge of the universe.
What is a god but a being that is worshipped by those beneath? Is great knowledge, power, understanding not enough for you to revere the Ori?
Respect, yes, certainly, but that doesn't mean I would murder innocent people in their name. I guess what I'm trying to understand is whether the Ori have spoken to you directly and told you to worship them, or whether you've misinterpreted some evidence you found along the way and developed this religion on your own. I can't speak for everyone in my galaxy, but in my own humble opinion, I don't believe that any individual or society can achieve enlightenment through fear-mongering and forced servitude, no matter what power is presented as evidence. These people to worship you.
We are their creators. All who follow the path will join us in enlightenment.
Do you know who the Altarans are?
Those who abandon the path are evil.
Whereas the ancients believe in free will and giving the people the ability to choose. Not even necessarily even to believe in them, because they don't present themselves in any way. Or they at least try not to, Omer being a rare example of actually intervening. The ancients have been hiding the Milky Way and its local cluster, like the Pegasus Galaxy and Stargate Atlantis, away from the Ori, sort of like stealth, so that they can't be seen, or touched by the influence of the Ori. However, the ancients also won't intervene in our affairs, even to the point that we use technology that alerts the Ori to our presence. Yeah, I mean, it's just like the first film where opening the box releases evil, and, you know, then we do it again. It's Pandora's box, but then you open it and find another box, and open it and there's another box. It's a very recurring theme. But the Ori, they explore and then they exploit. Once they find you and they reach you, then you either follow the Ori or you perish. It's similar to how the Crusade Wars went.
We're receiving a message from one of the Ori ships. Text only.
What does it say?
And those who are prideful and refuse to bow down shall be laid low and made unto dust.
Is that all it says?
Yeah, that's it.
Open a channel?
Then did Tireless say to the people of the low plains, seek not wickedness amongst your neighbors, lest it find purchase in your own house.
What was that?
Book of Origin.
Think it'll help?
Once the Ori had found the Milky Way due to Earth's free will, the ancients decided to change their approach from stealth into prevention. So the Ori gods, or ascended beings, couldn't use their omnipotence within the Milky Way or its local clusters. So instead, the Ori sent their followers through the Stargate into the Milky Way galaxy to promote Origin, the religion of the Ori. To cut a very long story very short, the Ori gods were killed by Merlin's weapon, and yes, that's the Merlin from the Sword and the Stone myth, King Arthur and Merlin. He was an ascended being, apparently, according to Stargate. Yeah, there's a lot of wizards coming up in this video. just go with it, okay? Now, at this point, the Ori are gone, but the ancients still remain, and still refuse to assist and aid us, and almost to the point in which they perished. But still. However, the followers of the Ori, the humans that exist that are following their plans through the Crusades, are still alive and still believing, and all that belief is building up power that is funneling into no one now. Imagine if instead of a large collection of gods where the power gets distributed to them shared equally, that instead of that, it all managed to get funneled into just one individual. That would be crazy, right? They're all dead, yeah? Right? Yes, they are. But their followers don't know this and are still continuing this crusade, with Adria as their leader, leading their war campaign as their prophet, for lack of a better word. I think they call her the Orisai. She also didn't know that her gods were dead, not for a while at least anyway. As a prophet, she also had her own abilities like the Force.
Think not. Hello, Mother. Okay, we all know, darling, that you have telekinetic powers. You can stop showing off now.
Because she had knowledge as an ascended being without being one, because she was the Ori's prophet. She was created by them, like, you know, a virgin birth. With Vala, part of the SG-1, who had a child, and that child became the prophet of the Ori. As a prophet, she needed to be able to prove her divinity, so they gave her powers and knowledge beyond that which she could have known. You know, but for real, in this Stargate universe. Luckily, though, Adria is captured. Despite having her extra powers, she is captured and contained, and although she somewhat tries to escape, she realizes that it doesn't matter what she does, she literally cannot escape. Not safely. Basically, she gets completely trapped and is unable to escape, unless she has the knowledge to ascend. Which of course she does. The one true powerful false god? When Adria the Orisai ascended at the end of the Ori arc in SG-1, she became the sole bearer of all of that power and belief, as one truly omnipotent being that could not be challenged as an individual when compared to any other ascended beings. I mean, even the Ori, with their shared power, still had the base level of an ascended being, like all the ancestors, but as individuals, they were still just not on par with the Ori. the ancestors just couldn't match because of the way the belief was shared. So, Adria was not just above an individual, but was the collective group of the entirety of those Aurais at this point. I mean, just flip and look at her. She's practically gone Super Saiyan. She's ready to take on Goku. Luckily though, she was still bound by the rules of the other ascended beings in the Milky Way galaxy, so she couldn't use her omnipotence within the galaxy, but still had a massive army to send through the Stargate into the Milky Way. But her ascension solidified her as the ultimate embodiment of the Aurai's objectives. There was no decision making needed. Her will was the will of the Aurai, making her the most dangerous ascended being in the Stargate universe. Or it being at all. The most dangerous individual at all. How powerful does a god have to be considered a god?
Not wanting to give you any ideas, but why can't you use the Ark?
It's just not the same. People need to be convinced to see me for what I really am.
Spoiled brat with the god complex.
Now, Mother.
The Ark can only be programmed to make people believe what is true.
Once the ancients have been destroyed, I will be a being of unchallengeable power, worshipped by all those beneath me. A true god by any definition, wouldn't you say?
I mean, there was one god mentioned in Stargate, like we've said already, that is considered by many in real life to be more powerful than Adria, even in that state. And which was that again?
There is only one God, sir. We are, after all, one nation under God.
And you think God is going to save us?
Well, unfortunately for that senator, his god also seems to have a zero intervening policy, because Yahweh seems to take absolutely no sides in the Stargate universe, just like in real life. But what makes Yahweh, the Christian god, a god? And the same goes for Allah, I'm not just picking on Christians. What makes the omnipotent, all-powerful, all-good, all-knowledgeable god a god? Adria is clearly a false god, but is it simply because ascended beings have been known to be killed? Because she hasn't been known to be killed at this point in the story. But are gods able to be killed according to Yahweh? Well, yes, Yahweh says so themselves. This is the KJV version of the Bible. It's usually the most common I see used, so that's what I'm reading from. I said, and that person who said I said is Yahweh himself. You are gods. Now remember, Yahweh cannot lie, so these people that he's talking to are gods. You are all the Son of the Most High, but you will die like mere mortals. You will fall like every other ruler. Yahweh here is claiming that beings in front of him are gods. Yahweh cannot lie. Therefore, they must be gods. Yet they can die like mere mortals. Probably because it's Yahweh saying it, that they can die like mere mortals. But still, a god seems to be able to kill another god. Even in Stargate, Merlin's weapon was a weapon created by Merlin, an ascended being, therefore on par with gods. I said, you are gods. You are all the sons of the Most High. Yahweh acknowledges their elevated status as gods. In Hebrew, Elohim, which is the plural for God, and sons of the Most High, a term for divine beings. But you will die like mere mortals. You will fall like every other ruler. Yahweh declares their impending mortality, stripping them of their divine status and condemning them to die like humans. So, if in the Bible Yahweh cannot lie, there were gods in front of him that Yahweh could kill. Therefore, gods can die, even if it is only by other gods, and even if Yahweh is the only god left. It is still possible that Yahweh could have, at least at one point, been killed, even if those circumstances necessary are to a point of extreme that cannot be obtained by us. Yahweh's death is possible according to the Bible. So why do we consider Yahweh a true God? Or at least some do. You know, it's a real religion, and a lot of people believe in it, is what I'm saying. I don't think he's a true God, obviously. But why do people consider Yahweh a true God, but Adria a completely false god, other than being created in the Stargate universe, but the concept of Adria being a false god from the get-go? Honestly, it seems to just be personal bias. Yahweh is a true god to Christians. Allah is a true god to Muslims. Kronos would also have been a true god of its time, despite how evil he was. But in this sense, it seems that being a true god is irrelevant upon even existence. Adria was a true god to her followers, as were the Ori before her. Anubis, also a true god to its followers. The Asgard, the Wraith, the Salish, they were all true gods to their followers, even this fucking guy. So if gods are defined by their power, perception, or even belief, then who's to say what a true god actually is? Maybe what really matters isn't whether a god is true or false, but what they mean to their followers. Adria, Yahweh, Ra, do they exist? Are they all gods? Or are none of them gods? God is so poorly defined as a word that you really need to make your own definition of it in the first place to start worshipping something as a god. God seems to have absolutely no necessary qualities, unless you're basing it off of personal belief. I believe it must be an all-powerful, all-knowledgeable, and all-good God. Someone else may believe that it might be a perfectly merciful God, or a perfectly judgmental God. I don't know. But again, even the word perfect is subjective, and we can go into many different traits here. The word God itself is extremely subjective, to the point where it means nothing, apart from what it means to an individual. Usually from preconceived notions of other people teaching them what God is, sharing their own opinions and biases of God. God is so often defined as undefinable, or ineffable, or uncomprehendable. If so, then all religions that try to define a God into existence are instantly failing by defining God, because God is undefinable. What makes it even worse is they seem to know what God's opinions are. What God thinks is evil somehow seems to be conceivable, but only to the select few. At this point, God seems to be so undefinable, so incomprehensible and ineffable, that God is usually defined out of existence entirely, just to try to keep the concept of God in some way confusing enough for people to still believe in. Anyway, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, all that jazz, and maybe suggest something in the comments below for what I can cover next. I've got quite a large list of what I'm already covering, but I'm happy to add stuff to it. And I'll see you around. Bye.